For over 2 millennia, we have treated infinity as a noun. Tracing back to Aristotle, we imagine it as an endless void or a distant, unreachable destination, a horizon that keeps receding the further you travel. The observer-dependent theory of everything, ODTOE, redefines this concept as a verb. It is an active process, the specific, measurable depth at which an observer monitors its own state. This depth is found within the self-observation loop. When a system observes itself, it creates a recursive layer, and the infinite describes how many of these layers the observer can track. Under this model, the scale we perceive in the universe tracks the complexity of our own observation machinery. A deeper recursive process produces the physical experience of a more expansive reality. The mechanical engine driving this self-observation is mathematically defined as the phi operator. Every time the system observes itself, it attempts to perfectly fold into a closed loop. It misses by a fracture, leaving a distinct gap, a residual error of roughly 2%. With each new cycle, this incomplete closure contracts at a precise speed, the golden ratio. This ongoing, imperfect inward spiral, always tightening, never fully closing, is the definition of potential infinity. Any observer with a finite budget of energy or time exists entirely within this unresolved iteration, suspended in the process of the spiral. This inescapable cycle of trying and failing to reach perfect mathematical coherence is what we physically experience as finite reality. Beyond this messy, in-progress iteration lies the absolute perfect limit it constantly approaches. This completed state is actual infinity. We visualize this limit through the real projective line. This one-dimensional line folds into a complete circle, merging 0 and infinity at a single coordinate. This pole represents maximum coherence, a ceiling that finite iteration approaches but never touches, no matter how the spiral contracts. Actual infinity acts as a sealed mathematical roof. It locks standard integer-based physics safely beneath it, inside the boundary of the potential. If an observer pushes past that mathematical ceiling by allowing the self-observation loop to run endlessly, the fabric of reality begins to change. To track this, the system's depth index must be promoted. It stops counting with standard integers and begins navigating a transfinite ordinal hierarchy. The mathematical landscape that maps this territory relies on the surreal numbers, a class of numbers developed by mathematician John Horton Conway. In this realm, the observer's internal counter no longer tracks simple steps. Instead, it tracks the birthdays of new mathematical configurations. While a finite timeline counts iterations on a flat sequence, ordinal tracking measures infinite depths nested sequentially inside one another. This transfinite ladder reveals a universe that builds its complexity through internal density, growing deeper rather than simply wider. This transfinite observation loop ultimately reaches a very specific destination, an ordinal known as epsilon naught. Reaching this height follows the hierarchy of ordinals established by Georg Cantor, marking a point in the transfinite where the depth counter effectively folds back on itself. Within ODTOE, epsilon naught is the exact fixed point where the depth counter observes its own value. At this specific depth, the mechanism of observation looks at its own state and finds its output entirely unchanged. Reaching this fixed point resolves the mathematical paradox of the infinite. It produces a state of structural self-consistency, where the universe's internal logic is finally accounted for. These transfinite structures carry a strict, concrete, and falsifiable test. This chart plots a Banach iteration tracking the observer's depth, showing the error rate dropping towards 0. For the theory to hold, this iteration must reach an error rate below 10 to the negative 50th power in exactly 302 steps. This test transforms infinity from an abstract concept into a physical mechanism. Reality is infinite because the observation loop driving it has no finite floor.